The dining room smelled of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and pine from the Christmas tree glowing softly in the corner. Laughter bounced off the walls, glasses clinked, and for a moment everything looked perfect. I sat at the far end of the table, smoothing my sweater, listening more than speaking, the way I'd learned to do over the years. Christmas dinners were supposed to be warm, full of love and family, but for me they had slowly turned into something else, an annual reminder of how little faith some people had in my dreams. It started innocently enough. My son-in-law leaned back in his chair, swirling wine in his glass, a half-smile playing on his lips. "So," he said loudly, making sure everyone could hear, "are you still trying to get rich?" The table went quiet. Forks paused mid-air. I felt my chest tighten, but I forced a polite smile. Before I could answer, my daughter laughed softly, not cruelly, at least not intentionally, but it still stung. "You know, Mom," she added, "she can't keep steady work. Now it's knitting videos online." The words hit harder than I expected. Online knitting course. That's what they called it, like it was a childish hobby, something to kill time between failed jobs. They didn't see the late nights, the planning, the filming, the editing, the dozens of takes just to explain one simple stitch clearly. They didn't see the messages from students thanking me, saying my lessons helped them through grief, loneliness, or financial stress. To them, it was just another phase. I looked down at my plate, pretending to focus on the food, but memories flooded my mind. Years of working ordinary jobs, being laid off, starting again. Years of being told I was too old to try something new, that I should be realistic, settle, stop dreaming. When I discovered online teaching, something inside me lit up. Knitting had always been my refuge, my skill, my quiet strength. Turning it into a digital business felt terrifying, but also right. Back at the table, the conversation moved on, but the damage was done. I could feel my face burning. My son-in-law continued talking about investments, promotions, numbers that sounded impressive. Everyone listened. No one asked me about my course, my students, or the fact that it was actually growing faster than I ever imagined. I stayed silent, nodding when necessary, counting the minutes until dinner would end. Then, just as dessert was being served, the television in the living room caught everyone's attention. The news anchor's voice cut through the chatter. "In tonight's local success story," she said, "a local artist has turned a simple craft into a seven-figure online business." The room fell silent again, but this time it was different. The camera shifted, and there I was. My photo filled the screen. My name appeared at the bottom. Words like self-made, online entrepreneur, and millionaire flashed beneath my face. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My daughter's fork clattered onto her plate. My son-in-law's confident smile vanished. No one spoke. The reporter talked about my knitting course, my students around the world, my unexpected success. She mentioned how I'd started late in life, how I'd been doubted, how I'd kept going anyway. I didn't look at them. I couldn't. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something close to relief. Validation. Proof that I wasn't foolish, lazy, or unrealistic. Proof that believing in myself hadn't been a mistake. When the segment ended, the silence felt heavy, almost uncomfortable. Finally, someone cleared their throat. My daughter whispered, "Mom, I didn't know." I nodded slowly. "I know," I said quietly. There was no anger in my voice, just truth. "You never asked." That night, I went home alone, snow crunching under my boots, my phone buzzing with notifications from students, journalists, and strangers inspired by my story. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd filmed my first shaky lesson, and let it all sink in. Success hadn't changed me, it had simply revealed who believed in me, and who didn't. 2 weeks later, the calls started. My son-in-law wanted advice. Investment opportunities. My daughter suggested managing my brand. Distant relatives suddenly remembered my birthday. I listened politely, carefully. Success teaches you many things, but one lesson stood out clearly. Respect often arrives late, and sometimes with an agenda. I smiled to myself, closed my laptop, and picked up my knitting needles. The rhythm was familiar, grounding. The days after that Christmas dinner felt unreal, like I was walking through someone else's life. My phone rang constantly, messages piling up faster than I could read them. Students from different countries shared screenshots of the news clip, strangers wrote long emails about how my story gave them hope, and business inquiries landed in my inbox every hour. Yet, mixed in with all that excitement was a strange, heavy silence from the people who had laughed at me just weeks before. At first, my daughter didn't call. Neither did my son-in-law. I told myself it was fine, that everyone needed time to process what had happened. I focused on my work instead. I filmed new lessons, improved my online knitting course, and recorded motivational introductions for beginners who felt nervous starting something new. I spoke directly to the camera, imagining the faces of women and men who had been told they were too old, too slow, or not smart enough. Every stitch I demonstrated felt like a quiet act of defiance. Then the calls started. My son-in-law rang one afternoon, his tone suddenly polite, almost respectful. He congratulated me, told me how proud he was, said he always believed I'd succeed. I listened without interrupting, noticing how easily confidence can shift into flattery. He talked about marketing ideas, expansion plans, partnerships. He spoke fast, excited, as if my success now belonged to all of us. When he finally paused, waiting for my response, I simply thanked him and said I already had a team handling things. The line went quiet for a second before he laughed awkwardly and changed the subject. My daughter visited the following weekend. She brought pastries, hugged me tighter than usual, and looked around my modest living room as if seeing it for the first time. She apologized, though her words felt careful, measured. She said she hadn't understood how serious my work was, how big it had become. I nodded, offered tea, and let her talk. Inside, memories replayed, Christmas laughter, mocking comments, the way she joined in without thinking twice. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a process, and mine had just begun. As my story spread online, interviews followed. I was asked about age, failure, resilience, and what it feels like to succeed after being underestimated. I answered honestly. I talked about doubt, about family skepticism, about the quiet courage it takes to keep going when no one claps. Those interviews brought even more attention to my online business. Enrollment doubled, then tripled. My knitting community grew into something larger than I'd ever imagined, a space of encouragement, creativity, and shared strength. 2 weeks later, the real test came. My son-in-law invited me to dinner. Just me. He said he wanted to talk privately. I almost declined, but curiosity, and something deeper, pulled me there. His house was warm, expensive, decorated carefully, like a showpiece. Over dinner, he got straight to the point. He proposed an investment idea, involving my brand, new platforms, merchandise, even licensing my name. The numbers sounded impressive, but something about his urgency felt wrong. He wasn't asking what I wanted. He was assuming. As he spoke, I realized how differently I was listening now. Before, I might have felt grateful just to be included. Now, I heard the gaps, the risks, the lack of respect for what I'd built. When he finished, I looked him in the eye and said no. Not softly, not apologetically, just no. I explained that my business wasn't a shortcut to fast money. It was my life's work, built stitch by stitch, lesson by lesson. I told him I valued trust more than profit. His smile tightened. For a moment, irritation flashed across his face. He tried again, pushing, reframing, insisting it was for my own good. That's when I understood. This wasn't support. It was control, arriving late and dressed as opportunity. I stood up, thanked him for dinner, and left. Driving home that night, I felt lighter than I had in years. The city lights blurred past as I thought about how far I'd come, not just financially, but emotionally. Success hadn't hardened me, it had clarified things. It showed me who respected my journey and who only respected the result. Back at home, I opened my laptop and logged into my course dashboard. New enrollments were still coming in. Messages filled my screen. People sharing their first finished scarves, their pride, their joy. I replied to as many as I could, using their names, encouraging them to keep going. This was the part no one mocked, no one saw, but it mattered most to me. At the next family gathering, the atmosphere was different. Conversations paused when I entered. Compliments replaced jokes. Questions replaced assumptions. I was polite, warm, but firm. I spoke about my work on my terms, not as a punchline, not as a miracle, but as the result of persistence. When someone joked about getting rich, I smiled and said I'd already succeeded long before the money came. That night, as I sat alone with my knitting needles clicking softly, I understood something important. The real victory wasn't the news segment, the money, or the sudden respect. It was the confidence to protect what I built, to say no without fear, and to keep creating even when no one believed. Christmas dinners would come and go, opinions would change, but my story, my hands, my skills, my courage, belonged to me.